أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome everybody from UKIM Scotland to our monthly program, which inshallah is going to be a regular feature now. Last Friday of every month we will be having lectures and programs like this, and also we will be supplementing these programs with Qiyamul Layl as a part of the Tarbiyah programs, inshallah, which will be devised in keeping in view the Tarbiyah needs of both young as well as the elder people of our society, inshallah. I have been given the responsibility to start the program officially with Tilawah of the Quran as always, and a brief introduction to that. After that, inshallah, Dr. Gill will be introducing our speaker today, and then we'll have inshallah the program. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. صدق الله العظيم. The Surah Al-Asr, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that indeed the mankind is in loss except those who continually remind each other of the truth and also remind each other for patience. Without further ado, I will ask Dr. Gill to kindly come forward and introduce our speaker today.
First of all, this is my pleasure to welcome you all brothers here tonight, and also welcome to our guest speaker, Dr. Hakim Yusuf, a senior lecturer, University of Strathclyde. Because we are running slightly late and we are tight with the time, therefore I will not stand longer between you and the guest speaker. But however, a couple of reminders. This is the second monthly lecture of the UK Islamic Mission, and we have decided and planned to hold monthly lectures last Friday of every month, same time, 7:30, inshallah. And we will be bringing on board different scholars on different topics, important topics. Tonight's topic, Middle East, past, present and future. Middle East is the heartland of Islam, and in a big turmoil these days. Our hearts beat with that holy land, and also hearts bleed on what is happening over there. We would like to listen from our learned speaker, and also we will invite questions from the floor towards the end of his speech. The prayer tonight, Isha, will be at 9 o'clock. We will break for prayer 15 minutes or so before the prayer for wudu and doing sunnah, etc. I'll give you a brief introduction of our guest speaker tonight. Dr. Hakim Yusuf is an expert in transitional justice, human rights, and rule of law. He is currently a senior lecturer and director of LLM program, Human Rights at the School of Law, University of Strathclyde, Glasgow, UK. His work on countries recovering from experience of gross violation of human rights and authoritarianism has won international recognition. He served on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in the Southwest Nigeria in 2011. His article in the International Journal of Transitional Justice provided a pioneering account of the truth-telling process in Nigeria. He has published his research in leading peer-reviewed journals, including the International Journal of Transitional Justice, International Journal of Constitutional Law, Law and Policy, and the African Human Rights Law Journal. In 2009, he won the highly commended award, Emerald Literary Network Award for the article Democratic Transition, Judicial accountability and Judicialization of Politics in Africa, The Nigerian Experience, published in 2008, International Journal of Law and Management. Dr. Hakim Yusuf is a well-traveled researcher and scholar. He has been invited to present lectures and deliver papers at several conferences, seminars, workshops, and summer schools across the countries in Africa, Asia, America, and Europe. He was formerly a lecturer and director of LLM program in human rights and criminal justice program in the law school, Queen's University, Belfast. And I now call upon, without any further delay, to our guest speaker, Dr. Hakim Yusuf, to speak on the topic Middle East, past, present, and future.
Thank you for inviting me, Dr. Javid, and that kind introduction. It's my pleasure to be here tonight, but it's also with a lot of trepidation that I take on this topic. I found after I had agreed to speak on this topic that it's a topic that could demand much more than I will have the opportunity to do justice to tonight. I found it quite challenging myself, trying to prepare for it. And I hope you forgive the very brief touches or light touches that I will give to it. Probably some may find a word or two useful. There may be people in the audience who are better qualified to talk about this. But I share, I hope, with all of us, a huge concern for that part of the world which affects all of us, no matter whether we are Muslims or not, whether we like it or not, whether we are aware or not. So it is indeed a very important topic to talk about what is called the Middle East and the rest of the world. Yesterday, today, and hopefully tomorrow. So, as the program advert said, I hope to touch on a little bit of these issues, the emergence of national states and disintegration of the Khilafah, the Arab Spring and its aftermath, what has happened in Syria, Iraq, and Egypt, and hopefully a little bit about the future. So, maybe a way to start is, what's the Middle East? We assume that the Middle East is actually a normal appellation or a regular name for a certain part of the world. But actually, the Middle East as a terminology is an abnormal. In fact, if this lecture was just about the meaning of the word the Middle East, we'll have enough to talk about. Because the main problem, I think, is just the fact of the name itself reveals so much as to why there are problems there. Starting from just the fact of the naming of the place that is not the middle, nor so east, as it were, that it is called the Middle East. So that area of the world we call the Middle East today never used to be called the Middle East until some while ago, some decades ago, in the 20th century. Even up to the beginning of the 20th century, it was called, more accurately, the Near East, and the Far East being China, Japan, Korea, and that axis. Okay? So, how it became the Middle East is also how it is. In my estimation, there is a lot to be said about this. But it's also how it is that the middle of anything, okay, is the focal point, scientifically, from where you have a diffusion of whatever. In this case, it's a diffusion of almost everything we stand for as human beings. In fact, when I was coming, I thought I shouldn't have prepared. Just a few moments before I parked my car, something just told me why don't I just change the topic to an ayah of the Quran? And that ayah, for me, captures what we are grappling with in the Middle East, or what we've been grappling with as mankind in the Middle East for centuries, but which has become so acute in the 20th century. 20th century in human history. May Allah save us. Wal asr. Hazay. So the Middle East is a Eurocentric term, actually. But the verse that I'm reminded of is A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Wa idh qala rabbuka lil malaika inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa qala ataj'alu fiha ma yufsidu fiha wa yasfiku dima'a wa nahnu nusabbihu bihamdika wa nuqaddisu lak qala inni a'lamu ma la ta'lamun. That verse that Allah said to the angels, I want to create man on earth as a vicegerent, as a representative. And the angels, because they have had access to the Lawil Mahfuz, they said, you want to put there somebody who will commit genocide. That is the word today. If we were to translate what the purport of that is, somebody is going to kill and spread blood all over the earth. Wayasfiku dima. They would actually literally pour blood, human blood, all over the earth. And Allah said, I know, and we are here, we don't commit murder, we say less genocide, and we are praising you, and we actually are praising your holiness. And Allah said, Inni a'lamu ma la ta'lamun. Allah said, I know what you do not know. And it is this last bit, actually, speaking with you, that gives me personally consolation. And before we go on today, I actually want to start by giving you consolation if you are concerned about the Middle East. Before Adam was created, this verse, Allah narrates an interaction between him and the angels on what the fate of man will be. This is important because according to some Mufassirun, according to some commentators on the Quran, experts on the Quran and its meaning, they said Adam, our father, alayhi salam, and our mother, Hawa, they met where? On Mount Arafah. Araftuk. I know you. I know you too. Okay? Allahu Alam. So, the Middle East probably is the first place on earth that human landed on. With all of our good and with all of our evil. This is the perspective I'm bringing today. It is not actually possible in one lecture for anybody with any specialism or specialization to be able to capture and talk about the Middle East and the world in 1, 2, 3, or 4 hours. It's not possible, no matter what. Okay? But there must be a perspective. And my perspective is, these days in my work, I tend to look back more. I just wrote a book recently, and I said, what point I want to make, I will only be able to make it by looking back. Because I'm finding it so instructive. In this generation of mankind, the West, in its ascendance, is recasting history, revisionism, and making us believe in building these castles, in making the internet, we have brought what has never been. When Allah had created people, ashaddu minna quwwa wa akthara jama'a, people who had been able to have more wealth, who had more power, which we are now discovering through archaeological findings. We need more Muslims in that field because we are supposed to do that. Allah said, "Siru fil ard fanzur kayfa kana aqibatul mukaththibin." Go back and see what has been the lot of those who refuted our power and our mightiness. Okay? So the Middle East is a Eurocentric term anyway. It assumes Western domination of the world. So it is middle to them from the West, but not middle of the world. They were more accurate when things were balanced to call it the Near East, which they were able to relate with, which spread civilization, which spread knowledge, but which for some whatever reason has been in turmoil. Okay? Thereafter. So it's a Eurocentric term, and it's probably better to conceive of it in its more neutral term as the Near East. Okay? And the very striking thing about the Near East becoming the Middle East is how when the British, specifically the British, it's amazing. Allahu Akbar. It's amazing how a small island captured the whole world. Not usually, and that is the problem till today in the Middle East, not usually through the force of arms, but typically through divide and rule, guile, wile, deceit. This Britain. Deceit, it's written everywhere in history. In the capture of India, sets the people in the royal family one against the other. That was the only time the British were able to capture India in the War of Plassey. That was the only, not through the arms. When they went there with the arms, they were beaten back. So what did they do? Go to the royal family, get the next person, tell him, why should you allow your brother to be the king? Why not you? We are going to attack him. Make sure, this is money, make sure you buy off his guards. And if we are able to get rid of him, you be king. Of course they got rid of him because he was able to compromise the soldiers. But they also got rid of the traitor. Alhamdulillah. So it is when the Near East became part of the British possessions and the last one in the late 20th century, though the scheming had begun in the early 20th century, but the scheming had begun in the 19th century, that it became the Middle East. Because until then, for the better part of 600 years and almost 3 decades, the Middle East was part of the Uthmaniyya Empire, so-called Ottoman Empire. Okay? And even in this naming, which has become unfortunately even accepted, and I'm sorry I have used it myself, so I'm as equally guilty, accepted even in the writings of Muslim authors who are supposed to know better. You see, even in naming, even in the ability, or is it disability, to properly ascribe people's identity to them properly, so that Ibn Rushd becomes something else, Ibn Sina becomes Averroes, Ibn Rushd, and all of that. People lose identity. After a while, they lose the real knowledge of what and who they were. And if you mention this word Ottoman Empire in the Middle East as Ottoman, without knowledge of the English language or learning in French, either way, it should be strange. It is a non sequitur. It means nothing to the people who it is describing. Just in the same way as the name Jesus will be completely non sequitur in the Middle East, because J, the tetragrammaton, is not part of that language and dialect Aramaic which Jesus spoke. The letter J has no foundation, none at all in that language culture. So that Isa or Isu becomes Jesus and it loses, and then that losing is significant. In naming the Ottoman Empire, you are already having a clouding of whatever it was about. So like every empire, it had its ups and downs, but its main undoing was to fall into the error of moving from a creditor to a debtor to those who wanted to take away their power, his power. And so on those terms, it became pliable, and because it was on the wrong side during the First World War, after the victors of that war came into victory, they were able to dismember the Middle East, so-called Middle East, the Near East. They were able to dismember it through guile. But it wasn't just something that they did in one fell swoop. It is something they did and which they are still doing, and they've institutionalized. That is the problem of the Middle East: divide and rule. So they went to Egypt and said to them, why should you allow the Turk to send the Khedive to you, to rule you, when you can be independent? You know, that independence has become very interesting word. Independence. And I have been able, and I intend to write a little piece on this soon, inshallah, to look deeply and find that it's actually two words which are meant, when you remove the first two letters, meaning the opposite when you join it again. If you remove the first two, independent, what has happened is that they've made people with the guile that they have become independent, i.e. liberated, they actually make them in with a small dash, dependence. So they put them in dependence. So they told the Egyptians, you should be, without the dash, independent. So the Egyptians were happy to become in with the dash, dependence. And that is significant because Egypt, as we know, is the heartland of Arabia in terms of its civilization at that point in this 20th century. So with Egypt becoming in small dash, dependent, it was easy to make the others also independent. Okay? So the Kemal Atatürk, who, by the way, was never a Turkish, but a Jew. Oh yes. Barack Ghani, you of all people, it's all over. Come on, you are more informed than this. He isn't a Turkish. And no apologies to the Turkish brothers around. He isn't. If anybody's in doubt, challenge me, I'll give you books, not book. So, the largest political entity in its heydays, covering the whole of the so-called Near East and as far as parts of France, Greece, Portugal, we are aware of Spain, okay, Italy, were all parts of the Uthmaniyya Empire. So today we are told in Britain, it's a Western Christian civilization and the Muslims have only come here as migrants. Well, simply because we also agree not to read the books. We are told revisionist history that doesn't even go any more than, as Bernard Lewis said, who is not himself one of the best or one of the most credible in the West, but not one of the most unbiased, still said that sort of story is as good as saying, as it was written in books here until some decades ago, that the Islam was spread with the sword, with the Quran on one hand and the Bible and the Quran on one hand and the sword on the other. And Bernard Lewis said, he said, that is so illogical as to be one of the greatest untruths ever told, because it presupposes then that those Muslim warriors spreading Islam with on one hand and with the sword on one hand and the Quran on the other, accept Islam or accept Indonesia, accept Africa, accept India, accept, or must all be left-handed soldiers. There was this generation of left-handed Muslim soldiers, all of them. Why? Because he is not a Muslim. Bernard Lewis is 97. I don't know if he's dead now. Okay? He's American. He said, it means that because no self-respecting Muslim would ordinarily hold the Quran, touch the Quran with his left hand, or hold the Quran permanently with his left hand. Because we know most people are right-handed. Otherwise, the Muslims bred left-handed soldiers who had to hold the Quran with their right hands and pick your head with the left. Otherwise, they'll have to hold the Quran on top of the sword, and it's ridiculous. So this is the same. This is the same thing when they tell us that we are migrants, we are new here, and all that. It's unfortunate. It's revisionism. Okay? We've been here. We've traded. We've contributed in every way for more than how long now? 700 years. So, even though the Middle East now, as constituted, was under the Uthmaniyya Empire, it's striking. I am mentioning this for a reason. One of the troubles today is the schism in the Middle East. Okay? So, the schism between Sunni and Shia. Symbol Iraq now and Syria. Symbol. Okay? Why do I mention this? Whilst the Near East, for the most part, was within the empire, the area that is today Iran and Iraq was historically an empire itself. One of the oldest, most powerful empires in that axis. In fact, the most powerful empire in that axis before Prophet ﷺ came at all. That was why Salman Al-Farsi radiallahu anhu was one of the military strategists of the Prophet ﷺ, and he said to them, we build moats to ward off enemies. And he gave the Prophet that idea, and Prophet ﷺ took it because he came from an empire which had some of the most tyrannical rulers ever on earth. Ever on earth. If you were going to their ruler, you will have to go as Sheikh Ali Nadwi Rahimahullah wrote in Islam and the World that you have to go, when you are like 10 miles away, you have to go, not walking straight, walking with in your normal, sometimes English fail me because I'm not the first language English speaker. So you don't go with your front like that. You actually turn your back in the direction of the palace and you walk backwards. You are too ordinary to go to the Chrysoprasus, okay, walking to approach him. Death behold you, Chrysoprasus, son of the sun god. That empire also. And it is important because the schism that has been partly played on and that has played out first in Islamic history and then in our experience of colonialism, and unfortunately today in our experience of problems in the Middle East, because for me the major problems of Muslims of the Middle East today is the Muslims. If the Muslim leaders get together solidly and say no more, there will be no more. I say there will be no more. And I will show you some intriguing facts. Okay? About 92%. So there has been a rivalry, an ethnic or race rivalry between the Arabs and the Persians, the two great peoples of the Near East, for centuries. Largely political, with some coloring of religious, more than anything. About 92% of the population of the Middle East are Muslims, but of course, Christians, and Christianity originated in the Middle East as much as Islam did. Judaism and the Jews are from the Middle East, and the Jews have lived forever in Iran for centuries. During the revolution in Iran, post the revolution, and there wasn't a problem. Until most recently, when, as usual, whisperings are made, but the sincere ones will always proclaim to you, we've been here forever and there's been no problems. So the Syrian Christians. In fact, I was reading something today that suggested that the Alawites were supported in the Middle East, in Syria. Guess by who more than who? By the Christians more than the Sunni Muslims. Because they are both minorities. Believe me, it is a natural thing. Let's be realistic. It's politically wise for them. So it is this emotional center of Islam as much as it is of Christianity and Judaism. And that's part of the problem. So, I've said it was the Near East. In creating the Middle East, we know for a fact that it was constructed from the ruins of the Uthmaniyya Empire, and this was after the First World War, after the Uthmaniyya Empire, which was the last bastion of Islamic rule. I wouldn't say Islamic, astaghfirullah, of Muslim rule. The divergence between Islam and Muslims has continued for centuries. Of Muslim rule. Okay? One striking thing, and that's why I said it's good to look back at history. If it is any consolation, is that the Middle East has been a site of 20, and I'm not talking about the Syrian conflict. I'm not even talking about the Iraq conflict. It's been the center of more than 20 major historical conflicts, right from the Persian, Greek wars to the Crusades, okay, and even to the Iran-Iraq war. Now look at the difference in these three examples. Persian, Greek. Maybe that is understandable. Two empires, two different religions. But to the Crusades, it's getting closer home, okay? But to the Iran-Iraq war, which we tend to forget sometimes a little about now because of passage of time. I prefer to talk about that more than what is happening now, because it's a little dangerous to be able to analyze what is still unfolding, so that there isn't a measure of misinformation. We are all witnesses to what is still happening in the Middle East in that regard. So, Iran-Iraq war, a decade of war between peoples who ordinarily, in times past, were virtually part of one empire, one religion, and throughout the war, anyway, one religion. Interesting. Okay? And we've witnessed the decline and dismemberment of the Middle East, or of the Uthmaniyya Empire, as a result of the consequences of victor's justice after the First World War. Okay? So what has been the drivers of conflict in the Middle East? Historically and contemporarily. In the past and present. And unfortunately, probably for the future. This is the hard reality. I may be wrong, but this is my assessment of it. I hope I'm wrong, but this is my assessment in terms of the future. Certainly, in terms of the past, the records are there. If I'm wrong, you can always ascertain that. Drivers of the conflict has been, one of the drivers has been resources. It's one. But another one, and depending on the time you are talking about, one is in ascendance more than the other. This is only normal. Another one has been external interests. In our times, and I think in the ways we will want to talk about it in this lecture, it is this external one that's been in ascendance since after First World War. One. And part of the problem is that the Middle East has been, not surprisingly, the Middle East includes a place described by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by what? By calling it the city. وَمَنْ حَوْلَ لِتُنْذِرَ. Okay? Allah said, we've sent you to warn those who are the people of the city. وَمَنْ حَوْلَ, and those who surround it. In fact, according to some geographers, Mecca is right there geographically, the center of the world, actually, proving وَمَنْ حَوْلَ, the whole world surrounds Mecca. Okay? And if it's in the Middle East, that's why I said, well, in some ways, their use of the word middle is quite instructive. So it's in the Middle East. It is a geostrategic location. Geographically, it is very, very strategic for countries and empires that are colonizers. And that is the issue with the Middle East. It's a gateway from the direction of Western Europe up there, that way to the east, to India. It's a gateway. And a lot of the problems have always started from the fact that it has places like the Shuttle Arab, that it has these strategic locations where ships can berth, and it has these canals, Suez Canal. It has these strategic locations where trading can go on and interaction can go on. So the truth of the matter is, it's a geostrategic location designed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because through the Middle East, world trade thrives. Look at UAE and what it has made of that. So you have a free port there. But it's also a matter that has come from internal dissensions. It's come from not just people coming from the outside, but because of historical dissensions, which go almost so nearly as close as you could to the demise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Within 3 decades of his demise, the grounds had started spreading out for some of the fruits or the seeds of the internal dissension. And I say this because in my culture, in my language, we say, and I don't know if there are people here who may not have been privileged to see the sort of animal I'm going to describe, is the lizard. In fact, the tropical lizard. We say that if your wall does not develop a crevice, that is a small hole, the lizard cannot hide there. Because of internal dissensions, the lizard is able to take rest and build and breed there in the walls. And I've already alluded to these internal dissensions. But in the 20th century, these internal dissensions took a most negative tone, partly as a result, as a measure for resistance, partly as a measure for, ironically, actually trying to unite the people, but like everything that is wrongly footed, no matter how well intended it is, especially from the perspective of Islam and Muslims, it will fall flat. Asabiya, Arab nationalism, if it meant being proud as an Arab, as I should be proud as a black African, is fine. But the moment it went beyond that and became a rallying cry of superiority a form of racism as it was articulated by those who ended up advocating it, I suppose, not by those who conceived it. It has become an issue, a salient issue, because it opens up old or existing or latent wounds. So you find Arab heroes turned villains like Jamal Abdel Nasser. You find even Saddam Hussein. You find Hafiz al-Assad, father of this one there. What is his name? The Assad there? Bashar al-Assad. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Good news. Bashar. It's become bad news. Now, victim of international ambitions. This, of course, is linked to the external one I said. International ambitions for so long are developed and always develops around flourishing nations and peoples, particularly one that is the cradle of civilization, the Middle East. The light that has spread to the world from the Abrahamic faiths, of course, like I said, is located in the Middle East. And that had made the Middle East shine, gave the Middle East power, but it also made the Middle East pliable when others were living as barbarians and vagabonds, when it was living as human beings, enlightened people with guidance should live. So it has been vulnerable to conflicts, both from an internal perspective and from people who were plainly jealous. Because you see, when we talk about these things, I have learned increasingly to move away from thinking about empires, superpowers in those very academic, even I'm an academic, very academic terms of, a lot of philosophy, a lot of theorization, to just remember that we are talking about people at the end of the day. In fact, usually we are talking about a few people. History has always been dominated and controlled by a few people. So you hear 20 million people died in the First World War. But you probably know only the name of Hitler, only the name of the Japanese emperor, and the other 20 million are Akthar Nas. Even Allah talks deprecatingly about Akthar Nas in the Quran. May Allah not make us Akthar Nas. It's just, people without a face. Talking about internal dissensions, talking about external interest, talking about international intrigue. The case of Kuwait helps us to understand what is part of the major problem in the Middle East today. When Saddam Hussein attacked Kuwait, it is logical for any right-thinking person who knows Saddam's record against the Kurds, against his own people, against the Marsh Arabs, to take umbrage and say, why should he do that? But you need, if you are not already long ago informed, to know that there was much more to it than met the eye, at least at the time. Okay? There was a lot of deceit, there was a lot of guile, there was a lot of divide and rule, and the usual suspects from her friends and the friends of the Middle East till today. The case of Kuwait is very instructive because Kuwait was part of Iraq, or if you like, it was part of the Middle East controlled from Basra for the Uthmaniyya Empire. It was a district controlled from Basra, which became the headquarters of Iraq after the dismemberment of the empire. And what the United Kingdom did was to suggest or to actually excise Kuwait from Iraq, despite the fact that the king they installed in Iraq was acting under their instructions. He could not hide his umbrage at it. And a movement developed both in Kuwait and in Iraq for reunification. And the king, who was holding his power at the mercy of the British colonial government, still had the temerity to insist that the movement be given life. So much so that there was a lot of protest and commotion that the British authorities agreed for there to be a referendum in Kuwait. And the referendum said, we want to be part of Iraq. But they then installed the Al-Sabah family and told them how well it would be for them to be alone, and agreed anyway still for a meeting. By 15th of July 1939, is it? They agreed. 1954. But by 27th of July 1954, the king, who was determined to have this reunification, died a few days to the meeting. He was just found dead. And it was recorded that it is believed that his masters, the British government, killed him so that that movement would die. Okay? Kuwait was created without any historical basis or geographical basis of those boundaries being recognizable in history. Okay? And it is interesting actually to find that when Jimmy Carter was president of the United States, his NSA, as you can see from his name, I can't pronounce it, but I think it's Zbigniew Brzezinski, okay, was the one who was noted to have proposed to Saddam Hussein as a way of dousing the long-term bitterness, even within an installed puppet like Saddam Hussein and his people, to have Iraq back, to have Kuwait back, because you see, Kuwait is strategic. It leads Iraq to the sea. Cutting it off makes it landlocked from a strategic way. Iran has the Shuttle Arab there. So they told him, that narrow Shuttle Arab, invade Iran so that you can get to the sea. And why? Because this was immediately after what? The Iranian Revolution. They were afraid that if the people, for once, in that part of the world, could rise against their puppet rulers, like the Shah Pahlavi, who wasn't a member of any royal family, who was installed, okay, because the nationalistic president they had refused to be subservient to the United States, United Kingdom, and France. They killed him off and installed a king without any pedigree of royal blood there. Then it was going to be very terrible for... Alhamdulillah, I've been given more time. May Allah save me. Now, it was going to be terrible for them if what happened in Iran were to spread to places where they had no kings, but where they had advised them to have kings, like Saudi Arabia, where they have a Sharif of Mecca. We all know the meaning of Sharif, because it is always said that Al-Saud ibn Ablazi, Al-Saud created the kingdom, and installed his sons as rulers, that is not exactly true. They had, until the demise of the Uthmaniyya Empire, a Sharif of Mecca who was advised, like the Egyptians were advised to be independent, advised by the royal family here to become a king. He was an Amir, he was a Wazir, Sharif. In fact, the terms in Islamic history, Wazir, Amir, are superior to the term Sharif, Sultan. He didn't have a Sultan of Mecca before they had a king. They had a Sharif who was a local district governor of Mecca, not of Saudi Arabia. But he was advised to become the king. And when they had someone who remembered that we were Sharifs and were supposed to be accountable to our people, he was invited. And we know the rest. So, they suggested to him, go and get your brothers. Let them allow you. And that started a war. And that war is interesting. It's interesting because when Saddam Hussein started this war, he was promised by the US that his brothers, note his brothers, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and other Gulf countries, majority Sunni, rich in oil, would give him financial support. Because these are the countries they don't, and also their rulers do not want another Khomeini revolution there. So he went there. When he was starting the war, he had $40 billion in foreign reserves. So he was confident and he was going to be supported. Anyway, after the war, he ended up being in debt to the tune of $80 billion. Majorly to who? To his brothers. But it wasn't a Kurdo Hassan. I think this is a term that every member of this community know. It is as Arabic as it is Urdu, as it is Punjabi today. Kurdo Hassan. Alhamdulillah. We know the meaning. People have bought houses, I'm told, in this country with Kurdo Hassan. May Allah reward those who have done and continue to do this. But this wasn't the Kurdo Hassan. Okay? He was pressed to repay the 80 billion by our Islamic countries. Not 80 billion, but 80 billion with interest. And that is where the bad boy told the West, which installed him, grew out from. This same guy that has been gassing his own people was a very good guy, as long as he helped to keep everybody in shape. But he didn't know that as he was being armed, of course, Israel was being given the results of the latest weaponry manufactured in the US before it was available in the US armory. Because they had begun to suspect this guy. Never trust the Arabs, he said. While he was there, busy with his brothers down there, his other brothers, the kind Kuwaitis, and remember, this was his final straw, had actually come in, extended northwards, and taken 900 square miles of oil-rich region and moved it into Kuwait and said this is part of Kuwaiti territory. And then what were you told? You were told, he warned them and said, in the first place you are part of us, we are asking for you back. Yeah, you are even taking part of our land. This is infra-dignitatem. You same people asking me to pay $80 billion with interest. So what were you told? We were told that one day you woke up and there was two soldiers from his army who were there to pick up every Kuwaiti. That was one of the whitest lies of history, because it never happened like that. Even though they did actually tell him to attack Kuwait, and he was ready, and he did plan to attack Kuwait, when we were told that he had already attacked Kuwait, there was no attack. If you find that difficult to believe, I'm sure you don't no longer find it difficult to believe that there wasn't any mass weapon of mass destruction there. How would they have supplied them weapons of mass destruction or right under their nose allow it when Israel is there in the Middle East, which has weapons of mass destruction? They couldn't afford such luxury. They didn't and couldn't. Okay? Kuwait, the Kuwait Sheikh had in fact very fast bought an American company, bought an American company with $2.5 billion, which had specialized equipment, so that without physically moving so much from the Kuwaiti territory, tap the oil in the 900 miles disputed area. And that was unacceptable because they had already started tapping the oil. And Iraq was told by the powers that be, old boy, as we say in my language, that is my friend, old boy, forget that bit. It's a fait accompli. It's gone, it's little. And the rest is history. But I thought to make the discussion interesting, like I said, it's so widely topic. To give you some intriguing facts, what I call, will not be intriguing at all, but some, what I consider to be some intriguing facts about the Middle East quickly. We know it is the cradle of civilization. We know that it has the largest oil and gas deposits in the world combined. The Qataris only have the largest gas, just gas. Okay? We know that over 3 million women, or maybe we don't, and children, I'm not talking about soldiers, were killed in Iraq after the UN embargo following the invasion of Kuwait. Because food was not allowed to be exported or exported to Iraq, or drugs, and people were dying of diarrhea and dysentery. And the United Nations and the superpowers of the Super Five of the United Nations Security Council killed more people than bombs killed in Iraq till today, in a space of 2-3 years, according to UN's own reports. It's also something we know, or we don't, that the Saudi family, royal family, owns the oil in Saudi Arabia now. Okay? And determines its shares from proceeds before national revenue is considered. And that it costs, the royal family, costs over $4 million annually to the country. That is $4,000 million to the country. How much does the Queen cost us? Okay. Now consider what this money is spent on and where it is. I don't think it is holed up in vaults in Saudi Arabia. Where is it? It's with the IMF. It's Chelsea hotels, American investments, and 60 billion one-time military purchase in times like 2000, but that is not even part of this 40 million. Okay? Do you also know that UAE, this suspect community of you Muslims that you are supposed to be, we Muslims that we are supposed to be, okay? Incidentally, the Muslims of my color were not really suspect until most recently. It was mostly Muslims of yours. So I was almost getting away. In the times I initially came to this country, I was almost getting away with it. But we are in the same boat now, if there's any consolation. But do you know still, we didn't use that United Arab Emirates nationals no longer require Schengen visas for 90-day visits to Schengen area countries. That is the most prosperous Western countries. Neither do they require it anymore here. Kuwait nationals do not even come here needing visas at all. Kuwaiti nationals, they can go to the United States, and they do with their passports. And they are supposed to be from these same Gulf countries, these Muslims that are terrorists. It's interesting. I'm using this to pick out what is the problem there with the Middle East. Okay? There is a problem there. the over is out of it. This means that Emiratis will no longer require a visa, yes. And that 60,000 EU citizens are living in the UAE. Yeah. Permanently. And that more than 1.6 million EU nationals visited UAE according to data collected in 2012 only. More than 1.6 million. 6.4 million. EU nationals, including British, visit UAE. This country that is part of the terrorist heartland. Interesting, isn't it? But the clincher is this last one. Do you know the most powerful currency in the world? It's not gold, it's the Kuwaiti dinar. Particularly after the invasion of Iraq. For obvious reasons. Who are the operators there in Kuwait? It is 2 to 1 or 2.5 to 1 pounds in my country's currency is 260 to the pounds, but it is 2 point something of the pounds. And it started out being actually 60. Oh no. The Kuwaiti currency worth 60 pence, but now it is the other way. Yes. It's strategic. This is also interesting about what is happening in the Middle East. After the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, and I will soon finish just now, sorry. For the first time in the history of the United Nations, until date, the only time, a commission was established. It was known as the United Nations Compensation Commission. It should be United Nations Compensation Commission for Kuwait. But they do HASP, When you are reading the Quran or you know Arabic, you do HASP. It's there, but you disregard it. So it's technically there, but they put an eraser on it. It's been cleaned off. Because it looks like a neutral body. But the only function it has performed is that it was established by Resolution 687 in 1993, I think, after the invasion, to do what? To extract reparations from Iraq for the invasion of Kuwait. And it has 15 members, all members of the Security Council. So invariably, the 5 permanent members are there from the 5 big, powerful countries. And Iraq has been made to pay a historical figure to date of 40.2 billion in war reparations to Kuwait through that commission. 40.2 billion out of 52 billion that's been mandated by the commission. In fact, I read today that they are projecting they will have finished paying by 2015. And people are dying in Iraq, and Kuwait is very prosperous. And this is one country initially. Let's assume it has never been one country. These are neighbor, Arab, Persian, whatever, Muslim countries. So it's not surprising, because those corporations are beneficiaries on 2 fronts. They were operating there, so they are beneficiaries from their claims for destruction of their property and loss of business during the invasion, and they are beneficiaries because Kuwait was rebuilt, remember? And who is rebuilding it? Certainly not the Pakistani companies, okay? Not the Lebanese companies. The striking thing is, no similar claims or compensation for the lives and properties lost as a result of invasion of Iraq or Afghanistan have been imposed, nor have they been contemplated, nor has the Arab League asked for this, nor is the OIC asking for this, and nor is it in international contemplation of these 5 big wise men who were able to determine that within these brothers, these ones should be paying that amount of money. So quickly before we round off, we are finished actually, long ago. So the Arab Spring, I have only one thing to say about it. It has brought out the contradictions when we talk about human rights, humanitarian law and international law. It has become, as a representative of the UN has said, a race against time. More people are slipping out of reach as the conflict intensifies and armed groups fragment and more battle lines are drawn amongst Muslims. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. السلام عليكم.